Professional job requirements are changing, aren't they? There was a time when those who had the best chance of getting hired with proper benefits and careers were mostly straight white men who were Christian and married and had 2.5 children, whatever that means. Now, people of all races and sexes are serious contenders for work. Now, you may have a greater chance of getting the job if you are not married and have no children, because you have more options with scheduling and your ability to travel for a company. You have more possibilities. If you are a reasonably ethical and tolerant person, that's pretty much all companies care about. Most employers don't care to know much about your religious affiliation. Most employers believe that the more diverse their staff is, the more they welcome the popular culture dollar. The church, therefore, occupies a much smaller place in social stratification. The church is no longer the great permission giver, is it? So, what is our job? But back to you. You may take on a job with all kinds of people doing work that you never dreamed you were hired to do. Writer Jacqueline Westlake's area of specialty is in preparing for and interviewing for a new job. She says when a job isn't what you expected, first of all, stay calm. The disconnect is not about you or your skills, it's about connecting you and your skills to the job at hand. You can't connect yourself and your skills to the job at hand if you are hysterical. Secondly, the Westlake says, give the job a chance. While it may not be exactly what you thought it would be, there could be something to learn, something from which to benefit at this job if you stay with it for a while. And thirdly, she says, talk to your boss. There may be a way to come to an agreement and to get a better, more positive understanding of what you are called to do if only you will communicate with your superior. Jesus had no predecessor. He was the new face of God. Nobody had ever done what Jesus came to do. That must have been more than a little nerve-wracking for Jesus. When John said, I need to be baptized by you, Jesus said, let it be so for now. I'm just starting out. When John baptized him, Jesus came up and his baptism was anointed by God, but he was immediately sent out to the desert to suffer and be tested by the devil. What kind of job was this? What kind of mission? But Jesus persisted. Jesus gave the mission a chance. Jesus gave the job a chance. And Jesus was perfect for the job. But why would he not be? He was born to do it. And as you and I have noticed in the messages over the last 2 weeks, Jesus has spent a great deal of time talking to his boss, talking to the Creator, praying to God. But according to this text that we read in our hearing today by Bob, the work was intensifying, wasn't it? The work was getting harder. John had been murdered. Everything that prophecy had predicted was coming to fulfillment, which meant that Jesus was going to have to go to Jerusalem, moving towards a date with his own destiny in the holy city. What a bright light in the work it must have been when Peter discerned that Jesus was the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus said, flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, Peter, and upon you I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Further, Jesus said to Peter, here are the keys to heaven. Whatever you bind in heaven will be bound on earth, and whatever you loose in heaven will be loosed on earth. But the work was intensifying, wasn't it? The work was also getting darker. Jesus explained to his disciples that he had to go to Jerusalem. He had to be tried by the temple authorities. He had to suffer, and he had to die. And Peter's first act, the rock, the church's very first act, Peter sought to bind the Christ. Peter took Jesus aside and said, Jesus, this death must never happen to you. That is not permissible for you. You are my Redeemer. You are my Messiah. You are my Savior. And that is why Christ said to this foundation of the church, to this rock, that is why Christ said, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me because you are not setting your mind on divine things. You were setting your mind on your own desires. You're setting your mind on human things. You don't understand how the work is intensified. Sometimes people can love you a lot. Sometimes people can really be in your corner. But they can do great harm to you because they don't really understand what you're about. They don't really understand your mission. During the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s, there were talented women in that movement, such as a teenager by the name of Claudette Colvin. And of course, you all remember the great Rosa Parks. Both of these women received huge press when they refused to give up their seats on the bus. They were lauded all over the country and all over the world as heroes. They were in great demand as speakers all around the country. But when it came to participating fully in the civil rights movement as leaders, as decision makers, the men of the movement didn't think these women were adequately qualified. So ironically, in this movement for full equality, women were denied equal status. When the civil rights movement was at its most popular, a man by the name of Bayard Rustin planned the astounding March on Washington, securing the venue, making sure there were buses to take people to and from the Lincoln Memorial, finding housing for those who needed to stay the night. He was a brilliant strategist doing sit-ins 10 years before Dr. King in the South. But Rustin was denied leadership in the movement for equality because he was gay. Last week we talked about Jesus telling no one his true identity. Movements are thwarted or even stopped when followers misunderstand their own mission, when followers have not felt the passion for the truth of the mission stirring in their hearts, and so followers deny other followers full community and fellowship. You see, Peter, in his first act as church, didn't understand that in a divided world that suffered, that the Son of Man, the Son of God, had to come and suffer along with the world for its own good. Peter didn't understand that suffering for the good of the world is the radical notion that gives the church, as battered and as beaten as it is, that is the notion that gives the church its mission. More than Little White Chapel, more than the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, the Church Universal is called to be God's hands and feet on earth, God's dirty hands and dirty feet, reaching out, holding, protecting, when nobody else will. God came and revealed God's self, not as a conquering king or a mighty angel, but as a dark, olive-skinned, most likely slight-built Jewish man who spent most of his time probably with unclean, callous feet, living outside under the stars, and who was not afraid to get his hands dirty as well. Jesus talked to a needy, unclean woman at a well. Jesus touched and healed blind and lame, unclean people on the road. Jesus called rotting, dead people back to life out of burial crypts. Jesus made connection with questionable, controversial people who needed him to suffer with them. Labor Day came into being to lift up and celebrate the builders, the tradespeople, the carpenters, the painters, the welders, the pavers, the dock workers, the factory workers, the people who labor so that society could continue to exist. Because everybody needs a job for society to exist. There have not always been unions with health plans and retirement plans. There was a time when laborers had no representation, no affirmation. Laborers had no rights. For many of the privileged, laborers weren't people. They were commodities and conveniences. So many people with a vision had to suffer and do intense work for laborers to develop a positive sense of themselves as proud American workers. And for their suffering and their work, we are grateful. This past week, you and I traveled from Charlottesville, Virginia, to the Texas and Louisiana area to meet a woman who fled there from Hurricane Katrina 12 years ago. This week we encountered her standing on a roof with her 3 children, not having eaten in 3 days, watching human bodies and animal bodies floating by her in the floodwaters. We watched her texting and live streaming to the world that if someone doesn't rescue her and her family soon, very soon, there will be no need to come. Up close and personal, we have seen seniors in Texas in assisted living, seniors who look like our dear Hallie and our dear Elise. But these seniors were sitting in their chairs up to their chest in rancid floodwaters. Oh, dear friend, the work has intensified. In a week, our attention has turned from statues to real people. We are now more concerned with the living than the dead. What can we do? We are in Burbank, over 1,500 miles away, fighting our own challenges just out this window. If you stop on the stairs when you leave, you'll be able to see the flames from here. California is over 100 firefighters short because California sent 100 firefighters, as we should have done, to be of assistance in Texas and in Louisiana. We must do what we always do. We must pray without ceasing. We must pray that God will be present in that situation, and in that situation, and in every situation. We must pray that some enlightened churches working along with rescue shelters will immediately throw open their doors and provide a safe place for human beings who need to come in from the flood or who may need to come in from the fire. No political hocus pocus, an open door, a dry floor, or a cool room, a welcome, the welcome of Christ. We must pray that your dollars and my dollars will combine with dollars from all over the world to alleviate the hunger and homelessness and suffering that is going to be going on in Texas and Louisiana longer than 6 months, longer than 2 or 3 years, but for a long, long time. We must pray that we will commit to our mission, which is giving. And lastly, we are invited to pray that as we look at parents and children and grandparents and grandchildren and all creation being waterlogged or challenged by fire, that we finally get it. We finally get it down in our bones, down in our DNA, down in that place that is even deeper than our political reasoning. We finally get it and see there is no them and there is no us. There never was. There's never been any difference between any of us. There are no separate histories. There never was. In this fragile life, we are all the same, all the same. We are desperate, suffering individuals in need of a touch from God, in need of asking God to hold our hands while we run this race. We all suffer. But Jesus came to show us how we can lighten the load, how we can lessen the suffering. And that's by bearing each other's suffering.